wealth and this magnificent view.
Couldn't agree more.
May our kingdoms prosper as beautifully as the stars.
John chapter 14. Let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also.
Because see, we're going to have these different nations in slavery, not only on the earth, but also on other planets. That's the glory of the kingdom. We're going to have servants on other planets. We're going to colonize other planets. All right? We're going to expand. You think about this truth, you think about the gospel, you think about the plan of Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai. Hey, you got that one song by Drake, God's plan. When you think about God's plan, it's going to take place on the earth. There's really a blueprint for what's going to happen all throughout the entire universe. For all throughout the entire universe. What we're doing is a part of a blueprint. You know, like this truth is a franchise, and it's going to branch out. It's going to expand all throughout the universe, man. To distant galaxies, you know. So don't be surprised, you know, you brother, the hopeful elect, the Lord give you your own galaxy or your own planet, own planets, and you colonize them, and you implement the laws, statutes, and commandments on them, and you're going to have servants on these planets. All right?
John chapter 14. Let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also.
Wealth and this magnificent view.
Couldn't agree more.
May our kingdoms prosper as beautifully as the stars.
All right. Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash. Double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule, teach well, being great examples to his younger brothers. And peace and blessings and salutation to the hopeful lake out there pushing his word in truth and in sincerity across the four winds. In the name of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai. Pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful lake, the believers, the listeners who may have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai. All right. And what I want to get into today, you know, I found this pretty interesting documentary, you know, from this little chick I've been watching lately. And she has some plenty good, you know, documentaries, you know, straight to the point, concise, you know, very informative. So this one, you know, dealt with, you know, colonialism. All right. Colonialism, so like colonialism, and I'm dealing with, you know, this precept, all right, because as these people, you know, go into certain histories, you know, the Lord, you know, has people bringing certain things out. Well, they don't understand, you know, that these, you know, documentaries, you know, just give, you know, just make the scriptures, you know, jump off the page, you know, and we go here to Job. Okay, because as everyone complains about, you know, the condition of the planet Earth, well, who's in charge? You know, you got everyone's, you know, at each other, and you know, men, you know, women at war, and children and parents at war, and you know, Democrats and Republicans, and you know, the left, the right, and you know, all this division. Well, who's in charge? Okay, who's in charge? All right, of this chaos. All right, there's now, all right, the the normalcy in the earth. Okay, is Esau Edom. So you go to Job 9:24. It says the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covered the faces of the judges thereof. If not, where and who is he? So the earth has been given into this man's hands. Okay, and this goes back to a promise. All right, a blessing that he received from Isaac. All right, which you would get it. When you get into the word given, all right, 5414. All right, because ultimately, the earth is going to be given into the hand of the righteous forever. Okay, but right now it's given into the hand of the wicked. Now, that word given goes back to the Hebrew word nathan, all right, which means to give, to bestow. Okay, you see, to lend. All right, this man has been lended, the rulership of the earth. Okay, it says to be given, to be bestowed, to be entrusted to. Okay, so the Lord has entrusted this man, all right, to be the ruler of the earth. Okay, he trusted this nation of people, Esau, Edom, to be rulers of the earth. And what have they done? And how did they get the earth? Okay, it goes back to their blessing. And this video is going to go into it. Okay, when you go to, Genesis 27. All right, so the earth is given into his hand, which goes back, to a blessing he received from Isaac. Okay, but this blessing was temporal. The blessing that was given to Jacob, all right, is eternal. Okay, it says, this is, I started 36, Genesis 27:36, and he said, is not he rightly named Jacob, for he hath supplanted me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, and behold, now he hath taken away my blessing. And he said, has not thou reserved a blessing for me? All right, so this is Esau, petitioning a blessing from Isaac, because Jacob had came and got everything, which he sold, his birthright, all right, to Jacob. And it was always set up for Jacob anyway, man. Esau is showing why it wasn't meant for him to have the blessing, man. Okay, it would be impossible for Esau to have an immortal kingdom, man, because he's about death. The theme of his kingdom is death. You see, Genesis 27:37, it says, and Isaac answered and said unto Esau, behold, I have made him thy Lord, and all his brethren have I given to him for servants, and with corn and wine have I sustained him, and what shall I do unto thee, my son? So Isaac is letting them know, like, look, he got everything, including you. Okay, you see, you belong to Jacob. All right, when it's all said and done. You see, and this is what these devils are trying to fight to overturn. Okay, the elites, you go to the elites and, these tech giants and these certain Edomites that's in the know. Okay, this whole technocracy takeover is about this devil trying to extend his rulership beyond, all right, what was prescribed to him, man, from on high. Okay, he's trying to fabricate his own eternal blessing through technology, man. Okay, and he's going to fail. Genesis 27:38, it says, and Esau said unto his father, hast thou but one blessing, my father? Bless me even also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. So he's crying for a blessing, and Isaac is going to bless him. And Isaac, his father, answered and said unto him, behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth, and the dew of heaven from above. Okay, so even when you go into colonialism, this devil coming into his blessing. Okay, now the way he would do it would be wicked. Okay, but that's how it was meant for the devil to come into his blessing, and he will be held accountable for that. Esau has been set up for failure. All right, that's what we have to understand. As Esau, he goes around the earth and he sets everyone up for failure. Well, he's been set up for the ultimate failure by Yahweh Bashim al-Shah. Okay, Genesis 27:40, it says, and by the sword thou shalt live, and shalt serve thy brother. And it shall come to pass, when thou shalt have the dominion, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck. Okay, so Esau will live by the sword. Okay, he will get the fatness of the earth through the sword. Okay, through witchcraft and through violence, man. Okay, perpetual violence. You see, because when King David, he conquered, he went to war for the kingdom. Okay, but he went to war so Solomon can have peace. Okay, and that peace would continue if we would have been obedient, but it wasn't that time. Coming to make war, okay, this one time. And after that, there'll be no more wars. But this devil, his kingdom, okay, is predicated on wars, man, continual war, because that's how he will rule, okay? And he will constantly take the fatness of the earth, the resources, okay, with what? The sword, okay? So let's go here. All right, I've got this video. I say pretty informative, Lord will, you brothers and sisters that are edified. All right, so let's go here. Like I say, 5 steps to colonialism. Okay, like I say, the channel Uncivilized. Like I say, she does pretty good videos, pretty good documentaries. So I just keep combing through them, Lord will, finding things that will be edifying for the body of a Radazai. But let's let me go ahead, share the link, copy. And y'all let me know if the sound and the audio, is good so far. And if the sound and audio good for the video, because I'm trying this Wi-Fi out in a new spot, Along the Wi-Fi good, we good. So yeah, I'm gonna let this play, and we'll add in the spirit as needed, like the water, bro. Call to wild, yep, the water, bro. So yeah, let's play this, we're gonna get into it, and they're gonna break it down, man. The goddamn devil, man. You see?
In 1899, a poem was published. Take up the white man's burden. Send forth the best ye breed. Go bind your sons to exile, to serve your captives' need. To wait in heavy harness on fluttered folk and wild, your new caught sullen peoples, half devil and half child. The poem is speaking to the USA, encouraging it to go forth and colonize its newly acquired property, the Philippines. This will make more sense if we see what the world looked like around 1899.
Before we tap in, let's get into this poem called The White Man's Burden. Okay, then we'll let the video run. So that was a poem from 1899. All right, called The White Man's Burden. Okay, so I looked it up and it said The White Man's Burden is a poem by Rudyard Kipling, published in 1899. It was written during the height of Western imperialism and directed specifically at the United States, encouraging them to take up the colonial duties in the Philippines after the Spanish-American War. Here's the full text of the poem. So here's the poem called The White Man's Burden. It says, take up the white man's burden. And they're saying, look, it's your duty as an Edomite to colonize the earth. And in the spirit it was. All right, because this was Esau coming to his blessing that we just read, all right, in Genesis. All right, he had the sword. Okay, he was the first one to introduce cannons and, certain rifles and certain weaponry to war. Okay, so this devil, okay, this was, his duty, to go and conquer the earth with the sword, okay, and colonize the earth. So he it was his duty to what? Fulfill prophecy, man. It says, send forth the best you breed, go bind your sons to exile, to serve your captive needs, to wait in heavy harness, old fluttered, all right, folk and wild, your new caught, all right, sullen peoples, okay, half double and half child. Now, when you go into, which, it's a pretty lengthy poem, but when you go into the breakdown of it, all right, you can look it up, and, analyze it. Okay, but when you go into it, it's context and criticism. It said the poem promotes imperialism and assumes racial superiority, which has made this subject and widespread. It reflects the colonialist mindset of the time that Western powers had a moral obligation to civilize other nations, man, and that was their justification for doing all their wickedness, to take lands, to take resources, and to enslave people, but that they were doing it under the banner of civilizing the world. Okay? It says modern readers often view it as racial and patronizing, though it remains a valuable artifact for understanding the imperialistic ideology. Now, when you go into the breakdown, okay, of the poem, it says written in 1899, right after the Spanish-American War, directed at the United States, urging it to take control of the Philippines, which had just been ceded by Spain, reflects the imperialist mindset that Western nations, especially Britain and the U.S., had a duty to civilize the rest of the world. Okay, and that's why they run with the theme that they did the earth a favor by colonizing the world. They see that so-called white man acts as if people didn't have any culture before he came. Like everybody, was just, grunting. There was no speech, there was no thing written down. There was no, agriculture going on. Like people was just, eating flies and eating each other, and everybody just had on the G screen, and that's how he pushes the world before he came. He came and civilized and brought infrastructure and brought, all these systems that make everything efficient. That's what he pushes, man. Okay. So when you go into it, it says Kipling adopts the voice of someone urging imperial powers, especially America, to accept the noble burden of empire. The tone glorifies sacrifice while downplaying the violence and oppression of colonialism. It says emperor duty as a burden. It says Kipling presents imperialism as a moral obligation, not a pursuit of power and wealth. Well, that's what it was. Okay, a pursuit of power and wealth, man. All right, but they try to, dress it up and make it seem as if, they're, doing the earth a favor by taking on the burden of imperialism. It says a white man must sacrifice for the supposed benefit of the colonized. It suggests empire, thankless and difficult, but noble. Okay, and it makes it seem like that they're doing the people a favor by coming and slaughtering. Okay, you see, indoctrinating, taking the resources, enslaving. Okay, now when you go here, it says racism and paternalism. It said the poem assumes racial superiority of white Westerners. Non-Europeans are portrayed as sullen, half devil and half child, and incapable of self-governance. Okay, here it is. You have all these different cultures that have been around for thousands of years. Okay, plenty systems, ecosystem, culture that agree with the ecosystem, the way God, okay, they just had, gold in the water to where, the water had different minerals in it. Certain trees you can touch, and be healed, and all these different things pertaining to life that was set up before this devil. Okay, well, this devil, he points the picture, and you forgot the Edomite, because he came up, he was talking in madness on X. I forgot that devil name. I think it's Matt Walsh, if I'm not mistaken, Matt Walsh. But he comes with this same ideology, and this is an ideology, man, that these devils use, to justify everything that they've done. Okay, so everyone else is a half devil, half child, a heathen. Okay, and he's these godly, civilized people that have come to bring, bring civilization up to speed. Okay, and civilize everyone. Okay, so it says Kipling claims colonizer will suffer hardship, receive no thanks, and be hated by those they rule. Yeah, Of course. All right, because you devils come and destroy. You take, all right, you destroy. As the scriptures say, in the book of Saint John. Okay, let's get that real quick. We always get this a lot, Saint John 10:10. Okay, but it gives the MO to the devil. And Esau always act like he's just being hated for nothing. Like it's unbelievable. All right, that people should hate him. Like there's absolutely, no reason. Okay, he should be hated. Okay. So you go here, it says St. John 10:10, it says, "A thief cometh not but for to steal and to kill and destroy. I am come that they might have life and that they might have it more abundantly," man. And that's for Israel to have it more abundantly, man. Because at the root in the rulership of Yahushua, we're gonna know his abundance, man. Okay, but under this devil, it's been a a lifestyle of scarcity for us as tribes, man. Okay, and you best believe that no one suffer more than the tribes under this devil's imperialism, man. Okay, but this devil, he loves to play the victim. So even in this poem back in 1899, you had this devil playing the victim. Okay, it says Kipling describes the colonizers being in bondage and darkness, suggesting that imperial powers are bringing light, order, and enlightenment. Okay, so he suggests that's why he called the time when he wasn't ruling the Dark Ages, and he brought the light. Okay, he brought order. He brought everything that you appreciate. He brought it. Okay, life will be meaningless without him. Okay, he enhanced life. Okay, and this is what this devil, the narrative that he runs with. Okay, reading this again, it says Kipling described the colonizers as being in bondage and darkness, suggesting, all right, the imperial powers are bringing light, order, and enlightenment, man. This is why the devil is known as what? Lucifer in the scriptures, man. Okay, which just means what? All right, light bearer, because he parades himself as this light bearer, man. Okay, it says this implies colonization is not for the West's benefit, but rather for the good of the colonized, a false justification of empire, man. So that's what that poem goes into. All right, it's called A White Man's Burden. You can look it up on the chat, or Google. You can ask them to break it down. All right, and get into it. But yeah, so let's go back here. All right, to the video. But I just want to get into their poem.
This will make more sense if we see what the world looked like around 1899. In capitals across Europe, human zoos were showcasing exotic specimens from the rest of the world.
People were displayed alongside animals right up until 1937.
Rubber barons were enslaving entire Amazonian tribes in Peru. Aboriginal children were being stolen from their families in Australia, and the Germans were carrying out a genocide in Namibia.
Monday.com is the best AI for work, and here's why. Let me show you mind-blowing things thousands of...
It was about time to be non-European. See, the past 400 years leading up to this poem had been open season on today's global south, a free-for-all of claiming and carving and conquering, spearheaded by European colonial powers.
Each man's need is that of his neighbor.
They called the first few centuries of this the Age of Discovery, but it was just a really long, brutal, and bloody monopoly. And they weren't acting in silos. They were watching each other, competing with one another, and learning and refining each other's techniques. Looking back hundreds of years later, it seems they developed a concrete system, a 5-step process on how to kill a civilization. And it all starts with step 1, mission. Before we dive deeper, a special thank you to our supporters on Patreon for making videos like this possible. Doing this work takes time, resources, and editorial independence, and we're only able to do that thanks to our community. So if you believe in what we're doing, and if you want to be a part of this with us, you can join our Patreon. It's how we keep this going. Now to the video. If you're going to set sail to destroy another people, that's an expensive task, morally and financially. Sending valuable men and resources off to the unknown for unknown amounts of time for an unknown outcome is a risk, and success will definitely require immorality. So you need a narrative to justify your actions to yourself and the people and politics you might have to answer to. Enter mission, to make conquest sound less like pillaging and more like a favor. Think of it like each white man's burden. This was the mission of choice for the Portuguese and the Spanish, who were the first to begin colonizing overseas.
Spanish explorers and conquistadors set sail to a new world, and from where they would ultimately return with galleons laden with treasure.
They claimed to be spreading Christianity and saving souls. In reality, they were massacring indigenous populations, and the Portuguese would even pioneer what would come to be known as the Atlantic slave trade.
And as you can see, what did they use? Christianity to justify the mission, So they use Christianity as a means, to justify, these missions, all right, of conquest, okay, and robbery and theft, all right. And this is why we call it, plantation Christianity. This is the religion, okay, that niggas can't turn loose, okay. And then even when you go into the Portuguese, okay, they the one that had, I know you hear brothers mention that good slave ship, that slave ship, good sweet Jesus. Let me see. See if we can find the slave ship. All right, so let's go to that real quick and we'll go back. Okay, I'm gonna just show you the devils. All right, they use the Bible. Okay, they manipulate the Bible. Okay, for their conquest. It has nothing to do with the true doctrine of the Bible. That's why Christians don't know anything about the Bible, because the Bible, all right, from the time of the Renaissance, okay, until now, has nothing to do with the true doctrine of the Bible. It was about the Edomites, okay, pushing Edomite supremacy. That's why, all right, even when you go into Judges 9 and 24, as we read, it said he covered the faces of the judges thereof. And that's why in Christianity, all right, the Most High is an Edomite, the Messiah is an Edomite, the prophets and, the great men of the Bible and women, certain women, notable women of the Bible are what? All Edomites. The angels are Edomites. Okay, because they use the Bible to push Edomite supremacy. Okay, now I asked about a slave ship named Jesus. Okay, so you go here because she talked about the Portuguese. Okay, which they jump started, the transatlantic slave trade, the Portuguese. Okay, it says the slave ship. All right, Jesus, also known as the good ship Jesus. The ship was originally called Jesus of Lubeck, all right. It was a 700-ton vessel built in the early 16th century in Germany and later acquired by King Henry, all right. The 8th, okay, the 8th of England. It says in the 1560s, Queen Elizabeth loaned the ship to John Hawkins, an English naval commander and one of the first English, all right, slave traders. Hawkins used the Jesus of Lubeck for at least 3 voyages in the transatlantic slave trade. Hawkins sailed to West Africa, where he captured and brought Africans, all right, which these are Israelites, often through violent means or deception. He then transported them across the Atlantic and sold them to the Caribbean and South America, primarily to Spanish colonies. The ship carried hundreds of enslaved, all right, Africans in brutal, inhumane, all right, conditions. Okay, going back to okay, let's go here. Within the book of Baruch. All right, let's get there real quick. Okay, the book of Baruch, chapter 4. Okay. You see, and you Jakes, you got Jesus tattoos. Okay, you niggas is crying. Jesus got you niggas still crying. All right. You're holding on to your enslavement. So you go, let's get this, Baruch 4 and 26. All right, and this is why we tell you Christianity is a slave doctrine, man, and that's why it keeps you slave-minded. Okay, when you go to hear the book of Baruch, and we'll go back to the video. When you get the book of Baruch, chapter 4, and verse 26. It says, "My delicate ones," and you see, I didn't plan this out, but you just see what the picture, is froze at, man. Jake in bondage and chains, man. Okay, it said Baruch 4 and 26. "My delicate ones have gone rough ways," okay, and were taken away as a flock caught of the enemy. All right, Esau, Edom, man, we were taken away as a flock caught of the enemies, man. Rough ways was that main rough way was that middle passage, man. From Africa, okay, mainly Western Africa, across the Atlantic, all right, to North, Central, and South America, man. Okay, so let's let it play some more.
Which the Spanish would then use to populate their colonies in South America.
We came to serve God and King, but also to get rich.
And all of this was sanctioned by the church. In 1452, the Pope decreed the Portuguese right to conquer and enslave, quote, Saracens, pagans, and other enemies of Christ. And 40 years later, the first Spanish Pope put out a decree declaring a vast part of the world for Spain. Now, the French and the British had a different mission. They saw it as their duty to spread their culture and values to more primitive people. They spoke of this openly.
Il y a pour les races supérieures un droit, parce qu'il y a un devoir pour elles. Elles ont le droit de civiliser les races inférieures.
One prominent French thinker believed that Black people were made to till the soil, the Chinese were made to be good workers, and Europeans were made to be masters and soldiers. As for the British, well, it was a prominent British writer that wrote this poem.
Much of the empire was built on greed and a lust for power, but the British came to believe they had a moral mission too, a mission to civilize the world.
And there were other missions. The Belgians claimed a humanitarian mission, the Dutch a merchant mission, the Zionists a return mission, and the colonizing descendants of older colonizers, the Americans, would claim manifest destiny, that these lands were meant for them. To be clear, whatever they might have called it, the real mission was power and resources.
Lands whose size and virgin wealth drew forth extremes in men. Wealth lay wasting.
And what these empires did to secure this mission was far from Christian or civilized. Now that you've landed ashore, it's time to guarantee the desired outcome. Here you have some options. The first obvious choice is organized violence. They all went for this in some capacity. But there's the more insidious options too. Famine was orchestrated by the British in Ireland and India, by the Germans in Namibia, and white settlers in North America when they slaughtered the buffalo that many Native American tribes relied on for food and overall sustenance.
Some nationalists have always maintained that the famine was artificial, that Ireland had plenty of grain, but it was all exported to England while the people starved.
Teenagers are building businesses with AI, while the only AI you know is ChatGPT. Let's be real. Most people.
Disease is another one. Settlers in the Americas would give blankets and handkerchiefs infected with smallpox or other diseases to indigenous tribes, intentionally. Stories of this happening exist across the Americas, speaking to a systematic approach used by settlers. It resulted in the deaths of millions of indigenous people. Other insidious options include displacement, settlements, and slavery. Now, you might think that people couldn't fathom this as immoral at the time, but they could. As early as 1550, just 58 years into the Age of Discovery, there were moral debates discussing the treatment of indigenous peoples.
La guerra contra los naturales es inicua y contraria a la cristiana religión.
And written accounts of the horrors. And yet they continued. These age-old tactics have been in play for centuries, all the way until today. Nowhere is this more clear than in observing one of the world's remaining colonies.
There are currently at least 196 illegal outposts in the West Bank.
More than 1 million people, the majority of Gaza's displaced population, are sheltering here.
About 300 people died in waves of airstrikes over the past 72 hours.
It is an absolute disaster, and it is not an unexpected result considering that Israel is purposefully targeting any kind of healthcare facility.
Every day, the cries of hungry children fill the halls of Kamal Adwan Hospital in North Gaza. Some children here at the malnutrition clinic have never known a full meal in their lives.
Now that you've conquered the local population, you need to keep it that way. Time for step 3, management. Let's not forget that within each of these colonies was a resource to be plundered, sometimes several. Sugar in Haiti, Jamaica, the Philippines, and Brazil, cotton in Egypt and the American South, spices in Indonesia, palm oil in Nigeria, silver in Peru, etc. And the biggest resource to be extracted of all, labor. Here's the problem with labor. You need it in large amounts to extract everything else, and you need the people behind the labor subdued and participating in your machine for it to function. So to get the labor that you need, to get the resources, you need a system. System here is just a nicer way of saying forced labor. And a lot of them were based on making people work to pay taxes that the colonizers invented when they got there.
The riches bestowed by the New World would usher in a golden age for Spain, not just making it the most powerful nation in Europe, but a global superpower.
The Spanish had the encomienda system. In the Congo Free State, there was the domainal system. The Dutch had the cultivation system, the Portuguese, the ingenio system, the French, Code Noir, and corvée systems. And of course, there's the explicit use of slavery, where tens of millions of people from Africa were kidnapped and taken all over the Americas to work on plantations and extract resources.
These ships would then return loaded with merchandise from the plantations, coffee, sugar, and cocoa beans.
These systems didn't just organically emerge for each colonizer, with no knowledge of what was going on in other parts of the world. Systems.
So, and what you have is what you call the triangular slave trade, with a triangular trade. Okay, so when you go into the triangular trade, and also we're gonna go show in prophecy. Okay, let me see, triangular trade. So you really pop up. But we're gonna go into it in prophecy as well. All right, the book of Jeremiah, chapter 17 and 4. Okay, so let's let's go here real quick. So when you go into the book of Jeremiah, and then we get that triangular trade as well. But when you go into the book of Jeremiah, okay, chapter 17 and verse 4, okay, this was a promise, so Jacob, you got, like you got them dumb niggas on TikTok, with a question up there, and they're laughing, in the background, okay, asking the Bible, asking questions about the Bible, scrutinizing the Bible. Well, you can scrutinize the Bible all you want. You're still subjugated to it, okay? Because they went into, the third part of colonialism, how to destroy civilization, okay? Well, what did they do, okay? Well, they made us to serve, okay? So when you go into Jeremiah 17 and 4, and thou, even thyself, shall discontinue from thy heritage that I gave thee, and I will cause thee to serve thy enemies in the land which thou knowest not. Okay? So at the end of the day, okay, we're in the land, all right, that we're not native to. Okay? The Lord sent us across, the globe to serve a punishment, and you can't get around it. Okay, even if Jake to think, that we originated in Africa, which we originated in Jerusalem. Okay, that's our homeland. Okay, but even if you, take that route, well, guess what? You still was shipped off to a land you knew not. Okay, and what was made to serve thy enemies. The Lord said He will cause us to serve our enemies. All right, for ye have kindled a fire in my anger, which shall burn forever. Which is for long duration in this context, okay? But you go into this word serve, and what does it mean? Okay, you go to this word serve, all right, which is abad in the Hebrew, abad, okay? What it says: to work, to serve, to labor, to work for another person, to serve by labor, okay? And the Lord said He will cause this to happen if we were disobedient. Okay? And this is what has happened to us, man. Okay? And you can't get around it. Okay? So let's go back. Let's get this real quick too. Dealing with the middle passage. Then we'll get back to the video. All right. But you go here. Not the middle passage, triangle trade. Okay, it says it is called, start up a little bit. It said the triangular trade refers to the three-legged transatlantic trading system that operated from the 16th to the 19th centuries, heavily tied to European colonialism. All right, the Atlantic slave trade and the exploitation of Africans, okay, and the Americas. It says called triangular because the trade routes formed a triangle between Europe, Africa, all right, and the Americas, North, South, and the Caribbean, okay? And it says goods traded, manufactured goods like guns, textile, alcohol, and metal products. Purpose: these items were exchanged with African traders, all right, and rulers for enslaved people, okay? Africa to America, all right? So Europe to Africa, you had manufactured goods, because you had Europe. Okay, they began to manufacture, okay, long before America. Okay, so they had goods like guns, textiles, alcohol, and metal products, okay, that will go from Europe to Africa, and then Africa to the Americas, what they call the Middle Passage, which we were speaking on. Main cargo, enslaved Africans, which was Israelites, route named the Middle Passage, the most brutal leg of the journey. Enslaved people were packed tightly into ships under horrific conditions. Millions died before even reaching America. Okay, now you go back, Americas to Europe. Goods traded, raw materials such as sugar, tobacco, cotton, coffee, molasses. These goods produced by enslaved laborers on plantation, all right, by enslaved labor on plantation was shipped back to Europe for processing and profit, okay, purpose of the triangle trade to maximize profit at every stage fueled the growth of European economies. Okay, so these economies of the day, all right, are still functioning off, all right, this advantage of having slave labor. Okay, this whole economic system, okay, is rooted in slave labor and maintained by slave labor. Okay, and then the main slavery is of the tribes. You see, colonial it says the maximum profit at every stage fueled the growth of European economies, especially Britain, France, Portugal, and the Netherlands. Colonial plantation systems in the Americas, the Atlantic slave trade, which forcibly displaced over 12 million Africans, which is way more than that. The trade system was built, all right, was built on the exploitation, violence, and racism. The Middle Passage alone led to the estimated death of 1.2 or 1.5 to 2 million, which, you know, those numbers are highly deflated. Okay, it was tens of millions, you know, hundreds of millions, all right, that died during that time. Okay, it says survivors endured lifetimes of enslavement in brutal conditions on American plantations, man. You know, and we know in the spirit that what this was a punishment, okay, for my power. Okay, but one thing we know, Esau, you know, he took it too far. Okay, and these people boast, okay, in this current system, all right, but this system is built off the slavery of Jake, man. Okay, this system, you know, got this start, okay, his jump start, okay, and was able to get ahead. Esau was able to get ahead of everyone because of slave labor, man, especially a triangular slave trade, man. I mean, the triangular trade route. Okay, so let's play some more of this.
Were being observed and refined. In 1861, a book was published called Java, or How to Manage a Colony. It's a thorough evaluation of the Dutch colonial enterprise in Indonesia for the British to study and use in India. It was also read by the king of a newly established country seeking out a colony of his own, the Belgian king Leopold II. From this book, he learned how profits from the colony were used to develop railways and canals in the Netherlands. He'd then travel and visit British and Dutch colonies, eventually acquiring his own.
Buried in their jungle, too backward to realize the inheritance it offered, the untapped resources of their vast continent.
Millions of Congolese are estimated to have died during King Leopold II's rule. Failure to meet rubber production targets was a capital offense.
He pillaged the land for its rubber and then used the profits to fund many projects in Belgium, leaving him the nickname King Builder. And then there's systems for demographic control and organization. The Nazis would study and borrow from the Jim Crow laws of the US.
German eugenicists were in contact with, in continuing dialogue with American eugenicists in the years and decades leading up to the Third Reich. That American eugenicists wrote books that were big sellers in Germany in the years leading up to the Third Reich.
And Zionists would take inspiration from Afrikaners and their apartheid system.
The granting of self-government to the Transkei, the first Bantu homeland.
What if you could taste the movies?
We turned that idea into an $11.3 million business with Wix.
So now you have your systems in place to extract your resources and keep your labor in line. Except this isn't going to work forever, because eventually people are going to resist, and you're outnumbered. And colonizers knew this from watching history unfold around them. So now you need friction. This will prevent people from coming together to overthrow you. This part of the playbook goes way back, often known as divide and conquer. The British did it in India, Nigeria, and then in Palestine by favoring Zionist immigration. The Belgians in Rwanda classified people into rigid Hutu and Tutsi identities and empowered Tutsis disproportionately, a system that laid the groundwork for future genocide.
The entire country had become a killing field. Hutus armed with machetes searched every house, every hill, and killed every Tutsi they could find.
Then there's the more large-scale execution.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Of literally carving up mass swaths of land into artificial borders, that continue to today. Like at the Berlin Conference of 1884, where Europeans came together to split the whole of Africa between themselves.
Africa, rich in resources that lay untouched since the world began.
Or a few decades later, the Sykes-Picot Agreement.
So these devils, had a council, amongst themselves to carve up Africa, man, and see what they do with this conquer and divide. That's why you see, what these devils will do. They'll plant, certain resistant groups in these countries, to keep these countries, in civil unrest. Because if the country is in civil unrest, well, no one is organizing to come against the colonizers. Because they have to deal with the internal civil unrest. All these, you hear about rebel groups and, these pro-this groups and pro-that groups and, these different armed groups and, Al-Qaeda and Taliban and, ISIS and all these different groups. All these are nothing but CIA, MI6, which is the British, version of CIA, operatives, and their whole thing is to keep civil unrest going, so that the civilian population, is always, being terrorized and, always in the uproar and the fear of their life. Then there's, no way that they can organize against, the tyranny of colonialism. Even on the small level. That's why you got the Crips, the Bloods, and all these gangs, and it keeps Jake at war with each other. Jake is, divided because even Democrat and Republican, those are gangs now, and there's no coincidence that it's red and blue. But those are gangs now. People are willing to get violent about who you voted for. So as long as they, keep people divided and fighting over anything, they don't care what it's about. That's why they let, certain controversial, people, have platforms, because they don't care what you're arguing about, as long as you're arguing and you're not having emphasis on what they're doing. So this is how these devils, run the earth, and this division is all throughout the earth. That's why you have a North and South Korea. Those are Western powers that did that. That's why you have the South. Korea is what? Pro-America, pro-West. That's why you have, Hezbollah, which is anti-West, but then you have the Lebanese government, which is in Lebanon, because Hezbollah is in Lebanon too, but they're pro-Western, So you have, all these divisions, in the earth, while this devil, rules and extrapolates the wealth, manipulate the masses, but that's how the devil runs the earth in confusion, man. You see? So let's go and play some more.
Where the British and French carved up the Middle East.
I should like to draw a line from the Ian Acre to the last Cain Kirkuk.
Once you've split territories between yourselves and split up the people within those territories, it's time for the last step. To kill a civilization for good, you don't just conquer the land, you erase the story the people tell themselves about who they are. Enter assimilation. Start with the language. In Algeria, French was forced into schools and administration. In North America, native children were stolen from their families and put in residential schools where they were beaten for speaking their language.
Professor Gabriel DeRosier is teaching Anishinaabe-Moan, the native language of the Ojibwe people. 120 years ago, on the very soil he's standing on, speaking this language was forbidden, even punished.
Cultural genocide.
Imagine being able to build anything just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44.
Then go on to religion. In the Philippines, Catholicism was forced on the people at sword point by the Spanish.
Its top is ornately carved with the crest of ancient Spain.
In the Americas, entire spiritual systems were declared devil worship and violently stamped out.
The conquistadors decided to build the original church right on top of the site of the Aztecs' temple mill, using the actual stones from the destroyed Aztec temples.
And it was a very defiant statement that we're here and our God is better than your God.
The last thing to target is the family.
Historians and scholars use the term fictive kin, the creation of family ties in order to replace the family ties that have been so brutally wrenched from you.
In the Americas, enslaved African families were routinely separated. In Australia and Canada, Indigenous children were stolen en masse to re-educate them into white society, the stolen generations.
He was in the front yard and somebody just pulled up and took him?
Yeah, policemen or rangers would come, pull up, just grab these half-colored kids.
But the ones who were taken have suffered ever since. With no identity, family, or bonds, many now suffer from homelessness, alcoholism, and other issues.
This last step is a more long-term process, one whose consequences are still unfolding today. This 5-step blueprint is not random. It is the result of centuries of experimentation, refined through generations of empire watching empire, learning from each other's mistakes, adjusting to the changing tides of politics, morality, and optics. And the blueprint is alive and well. In two ways. First, in the remaining colonies of the world, like Israel, where we see the culmination of that refinement. From holy mission
From on the Messiah will take us to Israel.
to violent might, to carving colonial geographies and continued erasure.
There are currently at least 196 illegal outposts in the West Bank.
All 5 stages are not only present, but thriving, and backed and funded by the very empires that wrote the original playbook. The second way is more covert. It's called neocolonialism.
Big dream, big hope. It was very romantic.
Decolonization and independence movements eventually swept through the world. But the machinery of empire never stopped. It just changed uniform.
Hello and welcome to the World Bank Group.
Institutions like the IMF, the World Bank, and countless Western-funded NGOs perpetuate the same playbook. Instead of Christianizing the savage, we have developing the global South. Instead of direct rule, we have debt diplomacy, foreign aid. The white man's burden is alive and well. Centuries of plunder built up some parts of the world and left the rest dealing with the aftermath. But it's not without cost to the colonizer behind the pen. Because in the process of civilizing the barbarians, you start to behave like one. Aimé Césaire, an anti-colonial writer from Martinique, wrote, "The colonizer, who in order to ease his conscience, gets into the habit of seeing the other man as an animal, accustoms himself to treating him like an animal, tends objectively to transform himself into an animal."
Yeah, so I thought that was pretty informative, man. You know, so I want to get a few precepts before we close out. They're pretty good video. So when you go here, because they went to also scripting, okay, our identity, and then you go into 2 Thessalonians, okay, what did Apostle Paul say, before the end, will come, okay. This is 2 Thessalonians 2 and 3. It said, let no man deceive you by any means, that day should not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. Okay, so there was a great falling away that had to happen, and then Esau will be revealed as he's been revealed now. Okay, then the end will come. Okay, but we fell away from who we were. Okay, and this last captivity under Esau Edom, we know, all right, that our heritage and the culture was stripped, was beaten out of us, and then eventually we was assimilated into this man's society. The worst thing that we ever did was integrate. Okay, we was much better off segregated. Okay, because even when, they stripped us from being, Israelites, all right, Jake still had family structure, post-slavery. And then what did he do? He attacked the family structure, okay, with feminism and the drugs. Okay, and that just obliterated the family structure, man, to where you just have, a nation of hyper-individualism. Okay, and that's why, 2/3 of our people will never be a threat to Esau's power structure. But the remnant, that has gathered themselves, okay, because as the prophecies say, okay, the remnant that has gathered themselves, okay, is a threat to this man's empire, because it's linking us back to our power. Hosea 1 and 10, it said, yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered, and it shall come to pass that in the place where it is said unto them, okay, and that's alive today, that that's, there's over a billion, probably a couple billion or more Israelites on the planet, man, just throwing a number out, okay, but it goes until they can't be numbered, because you can't even tell who's all an Israelite due to us being scattered, so this prophecy is alive and well today, that in the place where it was said unto them, and this is America, you are not my people, there will be said unto them, you are the sons of the living power. And see, we got our identity back, man. Isaiah 37. Okay, the Lord has put, the breath, the sinews, okay, the skin on us again, man. He's put the skin on us and the breath in us, man. Okay, to be alive again, to be living, okay, as who we truly are. Okay, and this devil, okay, when you go to Habakkuk, all right, it says that the devil will go on and tear through the earth. Okay, Habakkuk 2, okay, and 4, it says, behold, his soul, which is lifted up, is not upright in him, but the just shall live by faith, So this devil, there's nothing upright about the devil and how he moves, man. He was given the earth. He was entrusted with rulership of the earth, man, but he did it in the most wicked way that it could be done. All right, and he got to pay for that. Okay, he says, yeah, also because he transgressed by wine, he is a proud man, neither keep it at home. Okay, and what did Esau do? These different, Edomite empires, the French, the British, the Spanish, if they go to the 3 horns, okay, in the Daniel, the 7th chapter, with that little horn, which is America, will emerge, okay, and surpass, those 3, the British, the French, and the Spanish. Okay, and what have these devils done? Okay, they have, carved up the earth for themselves, man. Okay, it says it cannot be satisfied, but gather it unto him all nations, and keep it and heap it unto him all people, man. And this is what the devil has done, man. This man has colonized the earth. Okay, and if you're not, as Nellie Fuller say, if you're a non-white person, okay, you're subjugated, to colonialism, man. Okay, and no one had it worse than us in this. We got the worst of it. You see, but that's why, The scriptures say this. All right. This is Revelation 13:9, and this is what we await. And justice is going to be served. Okay. Revelation 13:9, if any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth in captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. Okay. And the saints are the Israelites, man. And at this time, the Israel of the elect, of the hopeful elect, and we just patiently wait, for the Lord, to avenge his people. Okay. And we're at that point, you see, because this devil, his next step of colonialism is him trying to conquer inside people. He's trying to put his technology in you. That's the next phase of colonialism for this devil, man. To him to try to put this technology in you. Okay? This is what this devil is about. You see? So his next phase, he's going to try to conquer the inward, the inside of people with his technology, man. Okay? A whole nother level of control and tyranny. All right? But we understand that this devil, is going to be stopped, according to, Yahweh Bashim Al-Shah. Okay? So that was the point, just wanted to get into that. I had listened to that a couple times. Thought it would be informative for you brothers and you sisters, man, in the spirit. So till next time I say Shalom, Kwam Yashala, Abba soon, Shalom.